Stick Figures by J. Wilburn, and we'll see what we can make of this. So let me tell you a story. It was a hell of a thing for her, for her to watch him die in front of her. More than just dying, he was coming apart, going from solid to lines against the stone and dirt. Less than a person. Nothing but memory once this was over. She thought they had missed. They thought they had missed him. She thought they had missed him this time. But obviously, she was wrong. Faye Dare didn't exactly hold him as he expired. She was too afraid of the dark magic of the alien creatures leaking over and infecting her as well. Did she love Paul Mall? That was a complicated thing. As far as she knew, they might be the last two of their kind left in the world. What would the monsters do with themselves with no people left to hunt? Alright, I'm going to add something in here earlier. Okay, I really need to get to something else, and I wanted to do it before this paragraph, but I think I might have to just suck it up and do it this way. Not just the last of their tribe. That was a certainty. But they could be the last two of their species in existence. This could be extinction playing out before her eyes. This could be extinction playing out before her eyes. It hardly seemed possible, but maybe it was inevitable. All right. Say, but did she love him? She clung to him out of fear. out of no better options. Faye, okay, we've said all their names so far. Faye looked away from him. Okay, his legs are gone already. One of his arms as well. The features of his face flattened. She expected he might be gone by the time she looked back, but she had to be sure they hadn't found her. Not yet. Okay. A few spits of stone held up the last chunks of powdery roof on what had been a structure generations before she was born. These ruins, these ruins could have been houses or areas of commerce and trade. Her own ancestors might have built them, or maybe those who preceded the aliens in this land. All of those are dead and gone, regardless. And Paul Mall joined them now. Okay, let's fix this spelling here. Proceeded. Yeah, that's right. Okay, I'll keep going here. All right. He wasn't quite gone by the time, let's say, she was alone for now. He wasn't quite gone by the time she looked down upon him again. Alright. He wasn't quite gone by the time she looked down upon him again. But his limbs were gone. Gone, let's say, along with most of his body. Okay. A smaller, okay, I don't know what I was spelling there, a smaller negative impression of him scarred the ground. She had seen these stick figure markers across ruins, caves, and rock faces across the land. her own parents, her siblings, the rest of her tribe had become these things at the hands of the monsters, who now ruled the land and all the ruins. Okay. Paul's chest vanished into the ground, and what was left of his face became an empty circle drawn in the dirt where he used to be, where his life ended. Where he used to be, where his life ended. Okay. She wondered if, because he had become a stick figure in the dirt, that the rain would wash him away quicker. She reached out. Let me make this a new paragraph here. She reached out to see if her fingertips might smear his drawing. Then she pulled away in fear that the dark magic would find her and take her too as a result. Footsteps, heavy footsteps from numbers of feet approached her. Faye ran and ducked into a washout beyond the ruins where she crouched. She had started to catch her breath again. She started to catch her breath again, but didn't believe she could outrun these hunters forever. They entered the space where Paul had vanished and stalked out to the disturbed ground where, okay, hold on, let me fix something. To the disturbed ground. Okay. where the drawing marked is passing. They were tracking, and she was only a mere 50 to 60 feet away at most. When one of them, hey Frank, thanks for being here. When one of them raised their tiny snout, to sniff the air, she held her breath and dared not to move even a little. They were monsters, all of them. They were destroyers of worlds, horrors to look upon. Alright, let's describe these monsters, shall we? So though each one was a different height, they were all tall and impossibly slender in comparison to real people, such as herself. Their pale skin pulled so tight against their rail-like bodies that they appeared to be deformed skeletons covered in tight, discolored leather. They had muscle, but nothing compared to her kind. The warriors they had destroyed. If not for their dark magic, they could be beaten to death even by someone as weak as her. You'd be able to see their bones snap under their leathery skin. Okay. Small heads with even smaller features, like people, but also nothing like them, made her shiver any time she saw them or thought of them. Being this close was death, and she might be their final victim. hairless and pale. Their beady eyes scanned the area. They knew she was still around, and they wanted to finish her off too. They weren't strong, and they weren't particularly fast either, but they seemed to never tire. They persisted until better people collapsed before them. They weren't strong, but they could use weapons. And, of course, they could turn anyone into a stick figure. The alien creatures moved away from the line drawing of Paul. Hello, Tempest. Thanks for being here. The alien creatures moved away from the line drawing of Paul at a diagonal from her hiding spot. Before they were completely gone, she had to finally exhale. Faye took care to draw breath slowly and silently through the shaking of her body. Finally, she rose from the shallow ditch to make her way off their search path and into cover in the other direction. Maybe it was pointless, but there had to be a reason to go on, even if it was just the drive not to die at their slender, evil hands. An arrow skipped across the ground off to her left just before another bounced off the sliver of stone from one of the ruined walls to her right. Let's see. Faye ran and they followed. Arrows were an old kind of magic that even her people could wield. They would bring her down if she allowed herself to be hit. Alright, let me spell wield correctly. With no real hope or faith in herself, she weaved between more ruins and cusps of trees and overgrown bushes. Okay, no more arrows flew, but she heard them charging behind her. She was so exhausted that her advantages of speed and strength were now neutralized. She heard the crackle of rising energy that represented their dark magic, the stuff that would turn her to lines. This was nothing to play with. Tom Duffy, thanks for being here, buddy. This was nothing to play with. This was nothing to play with because a glancing strike of the stuff had done Paul in and left her to survive on her own as long as she might. At a tall, rusty pole that protruded high into the air, stabbing at the sky. Okay, at a tall rusty pole that protruded high into the air, stabbing at the sky, she cut a hard left and fled down a slope between more ruins that were mostly buried in the uneven ground of dried muds from a previous flash flood. Being washed away might be a blessing. Movement off to her right drew her attention and froze her in place. It was the wrong reaction to being chased and was the reason that prey so often fell to predators in time. she assumed they had flanked her and led her into a trap. That might explain the missed arrows. However, she found herself alone with nothing to the left, with nothing to her right. There were a few stick figures against the top remains of one partially buried ruin. The things that had once been people were frozen in mid-run. It looked like a scene of hunters, but she knew these portraits were those of the hunted. The renewed sound of crackling energy set her into motion, and the renewed sound of crackling energy set her into motion, and she dodged into the underbrush to continue her retreat. She was now heading back in the relative direction from which she had come, but the plants provided some cover as she wound downward with the steep slope of the land. She couldn't hear the monster's feet, but the rustle of plants told her they were not far behind, and they weren't giving up. She probably should have, but couldn't bring herself to do so. Alright. Twice she almost twice her feet almost went out from under her as she ran headlong down a slope too steep for running. But she kept upright and pressed on, blind through the leaves, pulling at her face. The third time, the ground vanished under her, and she tumbled down through an eroded rut in the earth. She could hardly enjoy the coolness of the dark space as she took a bruising on the way. Say, yeah, we'll keep it the same one. Finally, no, we'll do a new paragraph. Alright. Finally, she tumbled away from the dirt and clay walls out onto the cracked tile of a proper floor. The ancient flooring was cool to the touch and sharp as it sliced into her hands, arms, and knees. Okay, Faye sprung to her feet, ignoring the pain as she looked through the shadowy space. There was not much left of the signs above the small caves, inlet caves that had once been buildings. She couldn't have read them if they had remained. She got the impression that this had once been a grand marketplace. Light-colored dirt cascaded down behind her and over the tile as the monsters followed. Faye broke into a run through the canyon pass. Okay, let's spell that correctly while we're here. Through the canyon pass of this preserved place. Every canyon. Okay, I'll do a new paragraph here since we got a chase going on. Every canyon had two openings, she told herself, as she covered the long distance before the monsters could arrive. She was wrong as she came to a stop before a sheer wall at the end of the passage. The inner workings of the tiles. Okay, is there any way to do that? Inner workings of the tiles and their dulled colors, climbing up that sheer face would have been lovely if she weren't about to be taken apart in this, her final resting place. She turned to see their slender silhouettes. Alright, that is not even close to spelling that correctly, but the computer knows what I mean. Their slender silhouettes. They no longer ran, as they now had her pinned like the animal they considered her to be. Their chests heaved for breath. Each time she could see the outline of bones in their fragile rib cages. If they got close enough, she could see their hearts beating. These killers were hideous, and they'd be the last thing she ever saw. Motion to her sides drew her attention. There was nowhere for more of these things to hide, but she looked anyway. Faye considered, I'm going to keep that the same paragraph. Faye considered that she might be going mad with fear. There was really no other explanation for stick figures to be moving along these walls like they were still alive. Then a few of them ran off the wall and along the flat floor. The portions of the dark lines of their bodies rose and fell with the bumps of the remaining tile. Okay. Faye backed into the last wall behind her to keep the shapes from passing under her feet. The alien things turned all her people into these stick figures. Now squared up for her. A few lifted their common spears and bows. Others turned their hands to glow with the crackling energy that would be her undoing. Then the stick figures charged at the slender monsters across every flat surface. They were distracted by the motion as well and spoke to one another in their hooting and clicking language. They tried to stab at the ground. A few fired straight down, breaking their arrows. I'll say Faye, we'll do a new paragraph. Faye wasn't sure what more these moving drawings could do if they were even real, until the monsters started to scream. All right. A few of them fell with satisfying thuds. Then their bodies tore open, spilling their bright red blood and exposing their fragile bones. Seconds before those bones snapped with their collapsing bodies. These stick figures swam over the bright surface of the spreading blood to continue the attack. Others made to flee, as if forgetting Faye completely. Others made to flee as if forgetting Faye completely, but they didn't get far. Okay. The ones bearing the magic fired it into floor under them. Tiles exploded up and out in clouds of dry dust. Some of the figures broke apart into separate lines. As they did, forms of their old bodies rose ghostly from the ground, as if using the dust to partially reform themselves for an instant. Then they were gone. Most survived in their strange form and continued the assault. One of the alien magicians turned its glowing hands toward Faye. The monster showed its tiny rounded teeth and threw the power off its hands at her. Faye dove and paid in pain upon landing on the abused ground. The wall burst behind her, and more tile cascaded down where she had been standing. It cut her shoulder, and then her shoulder burned as if set afire. The magician fell and was torn apart before he could power up again. Soon the canyon of ancient ruins grew silent, except for Faye coughing on the clouds of dust. That had nowhere to go. The stick figures spread out. The stick figures spread out from the field of gore. They formed a half circle around Faye as well. She was free to go. Alright, I'm going to make this a new paragraph because something new is going to happen here. She was free to go, but knew this was far from the only tribe of hunters looking to end her and her kind with her. But they had won for now. She made to lift herself off the floor, but her injured arm failed her. As she started to roll over, she realized she could not pull that arm away from the floor. Alright. Armand subscribed with Prime. Thank you, Armand, for giving me another month. I appreciate it very much. Hope you're feeling better. Let me know how your cold turned out. And if you were back to work, buddy. As she started to roll over, she realized she could not pull that arm away from the floor. Let's say she was afraid to look, but really had no other choice. As say her, I'll make this a new paragraph. Her greatest fear unfolded before her eyes. Her arm had turned into one thin line drawn on the floor. In the damaged tile. Alright, Armand says, still feeling not my normal cheery self. Bad cough kept me up last night, but going to get some words in today as soon as the pills and coffee kick in. You look amazing as usual. Thank you, buddy. I felt like I was having a decent hair day. I've had better. I've had truly Farrah Fawcett-like days, but today I'm doing okay, and I do feel alright. I guess I'm in the holiday spirit a bit, as much as a horror writer ever gets into it. Hope you feel better, man. I don't want you ending off your year on a bad note. Her arm had turned into one thin line drawn onto the floor in the damaged tile. Her shoulder followed it from the third dimension down into the second. Say Faye cried. It wasn't from pain or even fear of what was to come. It was just so unfair. They had defeated the monsters. It was only this small battle, but they had done it. It was only this small battle, but they had done it even after being turned into the drawings. They had fought back. They had won. But now if Faye was the last, it might be over. Say she never blacked out or appeared to die, as Paul and everyone before her had done. Her legs and her body turned to flat lines as her legs and her body turned to flat lines as she transformed from the curse of the dark magic. Lastly, her head became a circle, and she was one of the stick figures that surrounded her. Thoughts didn't die away in her drawn form, but they slowed terribly. She wondered if any of those flat warriors had been Paul or her family. She wondered if she could move along the ground like the others had for a while. Maybe they could still destroy the aliens for what they had done. For now, she waited, because why did she wait for now? For now, she waited. Well, let's just leave it at that. I don't think that's the best final line, but I may need to add some more. But I'm at 2,300, and I believe I have knocked out that story. That is Stick Figures. Really didn't know where that one was going when I started, but my goal was to keep it concise, not like hunt around for the story, and just tell it as best I could, and I think I've done that for now. This is definitely one that I think might benefit from editing in the near future.